Derrick never expected July 14th to be different. He woke up like he always did, brushed his teeth, tied his shoes with the same knot he'd used for 15 years, checked the weather, grabbed his badge from the hook near the door. Routine, comfortable, safe. But by nightfall, the ground beneath him would be gone. And by 8:47 p.m., Derrick would be sitting alone in a Walmart parking lot, engine running, staring at the steering wheel like it might tell him who he was now. Didn't, but something else would. Derrick was 38, a father of two, a loyal team lead at a logistics company, the guy who trained new hires, bought lunch for interns, and stayed behind to turn off the lights. He wasn't flashy, didn't chase promotions, but he showed up, always, early, reliable, accountable. For 15 years, he built his world around one truth: work hard, stay useful, stay safe. But then the email came, effective immediately, termination notice. No meeting, no warning, just digital erasure. First, he thought it was spam. He actually laughed. But minutes later, the phone rang, and HR wasn't laughing. Words like restructuring, nothing personal, thank you for your service. But for Derrick, it was personal, because that job had become his name, his safety, his worth. And in 3 cold paragraphs, it was gone. The following days felt like a long echo. He didn't tell his kids, didn't tell his wife. He just said, "I'm remote this week." But at night, he didn't go home. He drove nowhere in particular, sometimes to the edge of town, sometimes just behind the grocery store, sat in his car, windows up, silence deafening. He told himself he was fine, that he'd bounce back, that he'd land something even better. But the silence started talking back. You failed. You should have seen it coming. You're not useful anymore. The savings account was thinning. The mortgage date circled in red. The fridge humming louder than usual, or maybe that was just the quiet. What hurt most wasn't losing income. It was losing identity, and realizing no one seemed to notice he was gone. One night, 2 weeks in, he drove to a gas station just off Route 3. The kind with buzzing fluorescent lights and bad coffee. He didn't need gas. Didn't need anything, really. Just a reason not to go home. Inside, he wandered between shelves, pretending to browse, trying not to feel anything. The man behind the counter, probably in his 60s, glanced up. "Rough day?" he asked. Derrick didn't respond. The man smiled gently. "You look like you've been carrying something heavy. Whatever it is, it's okay to set it down." Just a few words, from a stranger, but they hit like a brick to the chest. Derrick didn't break. Not loudly. No tears. No scene. Just a quiet breath. The kind you take when you've been underwater for too long, and your body finally remembers how to come up for air. That night, he didn't open LinkedIn. Didn't update his resume. He opened a blank Word doc, stared at the blinking cursor, then typed, "I don't know who I am." No filters, no performance, just truth. The next morning, Derrick did something he hadn't done in years. He watched the sunrise. No alarm, no emails, just him, a hoodie, and the sound of birds. He walked through the neighborhood, past the same houses he'd rushed by for years. And for the first time, he noticed the world moving without urgency. He started small, applied for part-time jobs, took his kids on midweek hikes, went to therapy, volunteered on Fridays at a food pantry, just to feel like he mattered again. There, he started teaching basic budgeting to men and women starting over. And one Friday, a woman shook his hand and said, "You gave me more than advice. You gave me hope." Derrick didn't respond, but he smiled, and this time, it reached his eyes. He still wasn't back. Not in the way people define it. He had bills, rejections, worries. But what he didn't have anymore was the illusion. He realized something no one teaches you. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to see what you never actually had. He had built a resume, a reputation, a role, but not a life, not a soulfully rooted one. And once he stopped chasing the person he thought he was supposed to be, He began becoming the one he was always meant to be. That's where it could have ended. But something happened last week. Something unexpected. A message, an opportunity, a ghost from the past. And what Derrick decides next might change everything again. You're going to want to see what happens when life knocks twice. It had been 6 months since Derrick lost his job. 6 months of walking at sunrise. 6 months of handwritten notes on his fridge that said, "Just breathe." 6 months of rebuilding from nothing, and somehow creating something more honest than he'd ever had before. The food pantry felt like home now. The shelves didn't care about resumes. The people didn't ask for titles. Only presence, and kindness, and patience. And Derrick? He finally felt useful, not because of his income, but because of his impact. Until one Thursday morning, his phone buzzed. Proposal from Harrison Logistics. The name hit like a memory you thought you'd buried. His old company, the one that let him go with a subject line and silence. He opened the message. "Hi Derrick, we've been reviewing some of your past initiatives, and we'd like to discuss a consulting role. Your systems are still in use, and frankly, we've struggled without your guidance. It would be remote, flexible, senior level. Let us know if you're open to a conversation." For a moment, everything went still. The job was everything he once craved. Status, comfort, a title that meant something again. But underneath that offer was a crack. Tension, because this wasn't just a job. It was a test of who he had become, and who he still feared he might be. He stared at the message for 5 minutes, then 30. By noon, he'd read it 12 times. By evening, he hadn't responded. Instead, he walked past the schoolyard, down the trail by the river, and the voices started. "You'd be a fool not to take it. It's everything you wanted. Think of the bills, the kids, the stability." But another voice, softer, buried, asked, "What did it cost you the first time?" The next morning, he drove back to the office he hadn't seen since that day. It looked the same. Sterile glass, neutral landscaping, too quiet. He sat in the parking lot, the same one he'd cried in months earlier. But this time, he wasn't broken. He was observing, watching the building like an old ghost. Familiar, but not his home anymore. He saw the new team leads walking in, coffee in hand, Bluetooth in ear, all rushing, all polished. And it hit him. He didn't envy them anymore. Not because they were wrong, but because they were still chasing a ladder he had fallen off, and finally realized he didn't want to climb again. That night, he sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, email still unread. He stared at the blinking cursor of a reply. Then he closed the laptop, picked up his phone, called the number from the signature line. A man answered. Corporate. Clipped. Familiar. "Derrick, we were hoping to hear from you." But Derrick cut him off gently. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not that person anymore. And if I went back, I'd lose everything I've learned since walking away." There was silence on the other end. "Are you sure?" the man asked. "For the first time in my life," Derrick said. "I think I am." Derrick didn't get a counteroffer, didn't get applause, but he got something better. Peace. A kind of internal standing ovation, where the audience is just you, finally proud of who you became when no one was watching. He still stocked shelves twice a week, still volunteered, still journaled most mornings before sunrise. But something had changed. He no longer saw himself as the man who lost everything. He was now the man who chose himself when the world gave him the chance to sell out again. 2 weeks later, Derrick opened his mailbox. Among the bills and flyers was a small envelope. No return address, just his name, handwritten. He opened it, unfolded the paper, and read 5 words. "I think I'm your son." His heart stopped. The page trembled in his hands. The past wasn't done with him yet. The job was a test. But this was something else entirely. It had been a quiet Sunday. Derrick had just come home from the food pantry. Tired, but full. He poured coffee, opened the mail, and then he saw it. Plain white envelope. No return address. Just his name, handwritten in uneven script. Inside was a single line. "I think I'm your son." That was it. No name. No explanation. Just 5 words that made the air in the room go still. He read it again. Then a third time. Then just sat there, hand trembling, coffee forgotten. Derrick had always believed life moved in straight lines. Work hard, do right, provide, repeat. But now, a question cracked through everything. Could this be possible? He thought back. Years ago, before the job, before the khakis and the company lunches, there had been someone. Her name was Elena. College. Young. Brief. They weren't serious. They weren't ready. She left town before graduation, and they never spoke again. He remembered one phone call, maybe 8 months later. She had said, "I just needed you to know. I'm okay. You don't need to worry." And he hadn't asked what okay meant. Now he wondered if that silence had grown into a person. There was a number inside the envelope, scribbled faintly in pencil at the bottom. He stared at it for days. He drafted responses, deleted them, stared out windows, paced the backyard at midnight, imagined all the things he might say or hear. Then, one morning, with shaking fingers, he dialed. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a voice, young, nervous. "Hello." Derrick cleared his throat. His voice cracked. "Hi. My name is Derrick. I got your letter." "Yeah," the voice replied. "I wasn't sure you'd call." "Neither was I." They both laughed, awkwardly, painfully, softly. The boy's name was Micah. He was 19, lived 2 states away. He'd only recently found out about Derrick through a box of old journals and a college friend of his mother's. "I'm not asking for anything," Micah said. "I just wanted to know if you were real." "I didn't know you existed," Derrick whispered. "Yeah," Micah said. "That makes 2 of us." That night, Derrick sat in the dark, trying to process the impossible. He thought about all the moments he'd missed. First steps, first words, first heartbreaks. How do you grieve a childhood you never knew existed? He wrote in his journal, "I feel like someone handed me a book, 19 chapters in, and I'm supposed to pretend I helped write the beginning." But slowly, the guilt gave way to something else. Grace, not the kind you earn, the kind you choose. Micah wasn't angry. He was curious, open, hesitant. And Derrick? He was terrified, but willing. And sometimes that's enough to start again. 3 weeks later, Derrick drove 210 miles south. He parked outside a small college dorm. Micah walked out, hands in pockets, earbuds slung around his neck. He looked nothing like Derrick, except for the way he squinted into the sun. They hugged, not tightly, not long, but enough. They got coffee, talked about music, avoided anything too heavy. Derrick didn't try to explain the past. Micah didn't ask him to. They just existed, together, for the first time. On the drive home, Derrick didn't cry, didn't smile. He just felt still. Not the numb stillness of grief, but the sacred stillness of a door opening slowly to a room he never knew existed. He realized something. Fatherhood isn't a title, it's a presence. It's not about who you were. It's about who you're willing to become. Now, Micah didn't need a hero. He needed honesty. And Derrick? He could offer that. Maybe for the first time in his life. Derrick thought losing his job was the end. But it was only the first crack. The real transformation began when he let go of who he thought he was and opened the door to who he might still become. But there's one thing he hasn't told Micah yet. Something about Elena. Something he just found in one of her old letters, folded between the pages of a book he forgot he kept. And once he reads it out loud, everything might change. It was a rainy Thursday when Derrick pulled the old box from his attic. He wasn't looking for answers, just something to feel close to the memory of Elena, the woman he now realized had quietly shaped the last 19 years of his life without ever being there. The box smelled like dust and time. Inside, photos, scribbled letters from college. A cracked CD with Winter Mix 04 written in silver ink. And a book, dog-eared and soft from wear. The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. He remembered she used to underline passages. Something about longing and silence. As he flipped through it, a folded sheet of paper fell out. His hands froze. It wasn't dated, but it was unmistakably hers. The letter was written in Elena's handwriting, careful, looping cursive. Ink slightly smudged, like she had written it in a hurry or through tears. Derrick, if you're reading this, it means I wasn't brave enough to send it. I found out a few months ago. It's a boy. I didn't know how to tell you, not after how we ended. Not after I saw how hard you were trying to move forward. I want you to know this. I never kept him from you to hurt you. I kept him from you because I didn't want him to be a burden. And I didn't want you to come back out of guilt. But I see him now, his eyes, the way he studies people, the way he overthinks every question. And I see you. I don't know what the future holds, but I hope someday you'll meet him. And I hope he forgives me for waiting so long. You would have been a good father, Derrick. You still can be. He read it again and again, until the words blurred. He sat back in the chair, stunned. She hadn't just left. She had loved him enough to let him go. And now, after all these years, her truth had finally reached him. Not through confrontation, but through compassion. That weekend, Derrick drove back to see Micah. They met in the same park as last time, a bench near a crooked tree where the sun slipped through in uneven streaks. Micah brought iced coffee. Derrick brought the book. He handed it over in silence. Micah flipped through it slowly, paused when he saw the letter. "She wrote this?" he asked quietly. Derrick nodded. "I didn't know it existed. Not until 2 days ago." Micah didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, "I always wondered if she ever wanted to tell you." "She did," Derrick said. "She just didn't know how." "And you?" Micah asked. "Do you wish she had?" Derrick looked out at the trees, his throat tight. "I used to think I did, but now, I think this was the only way I could have been ready. If I had known back then, I wouldn't have known what to do with it. I would have been afraid. I would have run." The next few weeks passed like gentle rain. Micah came to visit, met Derrick's kids, his half-siblings. They played cards on the back porch. A little awkward, a little beautiful. Micah asked about his mother. Derrick told him the truth, the good parts, the mistakes, the letters they used to write before texting existed. And slowly, without force, something started forming between them. Not a perfect bond, not a cinematic reunion, but a thread, something real. One night, Derrick sat down to write in his journal. Only this time, he didn't write to himself. He wrote to Elena. "You were right. He's incredible, thoughtful, quiet like me, brave like you, and I'm not trying to be a replacement for anything. I'm just trying to show up. Now, thank you for carrying the weight for both of us when I couldn't. Thank you for leaving that book in the box." He closed the journal, turned off the lamp, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel haunted by the past. He felt held by it. But just when Derrick thought this chapter was closing, a new name showed up in Micah's texts, a name neither of them expected, and a question Micah was about to ask would force Derrick to make a choice that could risk everything they just started building. Because the past doesn't always knock. Sometimes, it walks right in. Came through Micah's email. Subject line, "From someone who knew your mother." No name, no attachments, just text. "Hi Micah, I knew your mom. We were close during her early years in Portland. She told me something before she passed. I've been sitting on it for years, out of respect. But now that you've connected with Derrick, I think you deserve to know." The sender signed off with a name, Rachel Calhoun. Micah didn't recognize it, but Derrick did. Rachel was Elena's college roommate. They hadn't spoken in over a decade. Micah forwarded the message to Derrick with a note. "Do you know her? Should I respond?" Derrick replied with one word, "Yes." Later that night, Rachel called. Her voice was older, softer than he remembered. carried weight, the kind that only comes from holding secrets too long. "I almost didn't reach out," she said, "but I think it's time you both knew why Elena never told you." Derrick braced himself. "She wasn't hiding Micah from you to punish you. She was protecting herself." "From what?" Derrick asked. "Then, from being left again." Rachel explained it slowly, as if peeling back an old scar. After Elena left school, she'd moved to Portland to start over, but life hadn't softened. She'd been rejected from 2 jobs, evicted once, and lived in her car for nearly a month during her 2nd trimester. During that time, she had written Derrick 3 letters. Rachel helped mail them, but none were answered because they never arrived. She found out later, Rachel said, that her landlord had tossed the outgoing mail one day when she moved, thought it was junk. By the time Elena realized, months had passed, and she believed Derrick had seen the letters and stayed silent. "She told me, I won't force someone to love a life they didn't choose." And that was it. She raised Micah alone, never tried again, never wanted to bring a child into a world of what-ifs. "But she never hated you," Rachel whispered. "She just didn't know you hadn't walked away." That night, Derrick stood in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a cup of tea gone cold. He thought about those missing letters, how 3 envelopes lost in the wrong moment can rewrite someone's entire life. How many nights had Elena sat by a window, thinking he'd read her words, and decided she wasn't enough? He didn't cry, he just felt hollow. The guilt wasn't sharp, it was quiet, the kind that doesn't scream, it lingers. They met the next morning. A walk by the lake, gray skies above. Micah hadn't said much since reading Rachel's follow-up. "So, the letters never made it," he said softly. "No," Derrick replied, "and I never knew to look. She spent her whole life thinking you didn't want us, and I spent mine thinking she chose to erase me." They walked in silence for a few moments. Then Micah spoke again. "Do you think she regretted it?" Derrick stopped walking. "I think she did the best she could with what she believed was true. And if I had been in her shoes, maybe I would have made the same choice." Micah nodded. His eyes filled, but no tears fell. "I don't hate her," he said. "I just wish we all had a few more years together." "Me too," Derrick whispered. "But we have this one, and I'm not wasting it." Later that night, Derrick opened his journal. He wrote, "She never told me the truth, but now I know why. It wasn't because she didn't trust me. It's because life had trained her to expect abandonment. But even in the silence, she left a trail back to us. The book, the letter, the son who found me anyway." He closed the journal and smiled through the ache. Love, he realized, doesn't always look like presence. Sometimes, it looks like restraint. Sometimes, it looks like protecting someone from the pain of false hope. And sometimes, it looks like trusting that truth will find its way, even if it takes 19 years and a lost envelope to get there. But as the past quiets, Micah starts asking a new question, not about where he came from, but about where he's going. Because someone just offered him a job in the very city his mother once ran from. Repeat her path, or rewrite it. And Derrick? He must learn how to let go without losing what he just found. Came on a Thursday. Micah had been applying to internships, not seriously, just casting lines. He didn't expect to get a call back, let alone an offer. But there it was, Policy Research Fellowship. In Portland, the same city his mother once ran from. Full-time, 2-year track, relocation covered. Micah stared at the email for a long time. He knew what Portland meant. He also knew what it didn't mean. It wasn't just a job. It was a choice. To walk into the city that had shaped his mother's silence and try to give it a new sound. They met at their usual bench by the lake. Micah brought the news with shaky hands. "I got the Portland Fellowship," he said. Derrick froze. "That's amazing," he said, but his voice caught, because amazing also meant distance. "I haven't said yes," Micah added. "I wanted to talk to you first." "Why?" Derrick asked gently. Micah looked down at his hands. "Because I don't want you to feel like I'm leaving." Not after everything. Derrick was quiet for a long time. Then he spoke softly. Micah, loving someone doesn't mean holding them close. Sometimes, it means letting them go far. Go rewrite what that city means. Not for me, not for her, for you. Micah's eyes filled, and in that moment, he understood something most people never do, that being someone's son doesn't just mean being loved. It means being freed. The last week moved fast. Boxes, emails, goodbyes. Micah didn't say much during their final dinner. Neither did Derrick. Not because there was nothing to say, but because there was too much. They just sat there, two men tethered by history and healed by truth. As Micah loaded the last bag into the backseat, he turned to Derrick. You're the only dad I've ever known, even if I didn't know it at the time. Derrick pulled him into a hug. Go become everything she hoped you'd be, and if you ever get lost again, you know where to find me. That night, Derrick walked the neighborhood alone. Same hoodie, same sunrise, but everything felt different. Not heavier, not lonelier, just still. He stood on the corner as the sun crept over the rooftops and whispered to the sky, thank you. Not to Micah, not to Elena, not even to life, just to the silence, to the way healing sneaks in when you're not performing for it. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was watching his life fall apart. He felt like he was watching it bloom. Hey friend, if you've ever loved someone so deeply that letting them go hurt more than holding on, you're not alone. Sometimes life doesn't give us closure. It gives us continuation, a second chance, a new perspective, a story we didn't know we needed until we lived it. Derrick didn't just find his son. He found himself, not in the role he once clung to, but in the quiet way he chose to love, without possession. And Micah? He didn't repeat the story. He rewrote it. If the story stayed with you, even just for a few seconds longer than you expected, then maybe it's time to pick up the phone, to write that letter, to forgive what couldn't be said. And if you'd like more stories like this, the kind that don't just entertain, but remind you who you are, subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment about the moment that moved you most. Share this video with someone who's still healing, because sometimes all it takes is one story to change the way we carry our own. We'll see you in the next one.